Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into a complex and, frankly, still evolving story.
Yeah.
We're looking at the major, potentially historic trials unfolding in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And we're putting a particular focus on the high-profile case involving Sean Diddy Combs.
Mm-hmm.
These are the kinds of cases that just really grab the national spotlight.
They absolutely do. And I think our aim today is to go beyond just those splashy headlines.
Yeah.
We want to help you understand the really intricate legal processes involved here, the serious and often, frankly, disturbing allegations that have come out,
Yeah,
and also the broader societal conversations that these cases always seem to spark.
definitely. So to help us untangle all of this, what kind of sources are we even working with here? What did we pull together?
Well, we've got quite a mix. We've looked at everything from a pretty lively Reddit discussion thread where people are speculating about what might be the next trial of the century, all the way to official court documents that detail some truly, truly serious allegations. And of course, the latest news updates coming right from inside the courtroom itself.
That's exactly why we're here. Our goal is really just to distill all of this down for you so you can walk away with a clearer, more comprehensive understanding of what's actually happening and, importantly, why it matters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's unpack this. So maybe let's start with that public discussion, the sort of buzz, because it's really a fascinating snapshot of where things stand right now.
Yeah.
The Reddit discussions we looked at are just absolutely humming with this idea that 2025 is shaping up to be a year of, big historic trials.
Mm-hmm.
People are mentioning Diddy's case naturally, but also Luigi's trial and even, the potential for a Jay-Z trial down the line. There's this real sense that we're in some pretty wild times.
It's interesting how quickly that term trial of the century gets tossed around, isn't it?
It really is.
It immediately makes you think of past media obsessions, I guess, like O.J. Simpson or maybe Michael Jackson.
Exactly.
So when people use that phrase now, what are they really looking for? What makes a trial capture the public imagination like that, beyond just, the celebrity name attached?
Well, the opinions on Reddit really kind of show the different angles on that. Public opinion, especially around Diddy's trial and this potential Jay-Z situation, it's incredibly divided.
Right.
You've got some Redditors who are totally convinced Diddy's trial, especially with Jay-Z potentially tangled up in it somehow, could absolutely be the next big one, the trial of the century. But then you have others who are pretty skeptical about Jay-Z's involvement reaching that kind of level. Right. They point out his situation, if it even goes to trial, is a civil lawsuit, not criminal.
Big difference.
Huge difference. And it's largely based on accounts, right? In fact, one Redditor was very direct, saying something like, Jay-Z won't go to trial. His accusation is a blatant money grab. She's already recanting.
Wow. Okay. Strong opinions there.
Yeah. And others pointed out the statute of limitations had passed anyway for any criminal charges against Jay-Z.
Yeah.
So lots of debate there.
And then there's the Luigi Mangione case. His trial is also being called Hugie by some people online.
Right.
Mostly because of his kind of unexpected fan base and what some see as his rhetorical impact. Some are even speculating it could spark a social revolution if he's found guilty.
A social revolution. That's quite a claim.
It is. But for every person saying that, you get strong counterpoints. Some call Luigi, quote, a random who'll be forgotten in a year by anyone not really plugged in.
Yeah.
They argue his trial won't be that interesting because there are apparently mounds of evidence.
So, more straightforward, maybe.
That's the argument. But then other users push back, saying Luigi is already a household name and that completely normal people, both liberal and conservative, will defend him. They see the issue as, quote, bigger than some niche internet topic.
It's really quite something how quickly these public narratives take shape, isn't it? Often way before any official verdict. And how different the perceived impact of a trial can be depending on who you ask. We also saw, a brief mention in the thread about Trump's trial and how the fact it wasn't televised apparently hurt its public impact. But just to be clear for everyone listening, for this deep dive, we're sticking strictly to the material we have on Diddy, Luigi, and Jay-Z. We're not endorsing any political viewpoints here.
Right, just reporting what's in the discussion. What's really striking across all these different threads is this shared feeling that, quote, 2024 has been the wildest year I've ever lived through.
Yeah, I saw that comment too.
And this expectation that 2025 is going to be even wilder, maybe even, quote, 2020 levels of wild.
Wow.
It really suggests there's this widespread public appetite, maybe, for these high-stakes legal dramas. A sense that huge events are constantly happening, And these celebrity trials just fit right into that feeling.
So, okay, if public speculation is running that wild, what does that actually mean for how the real allegations and the court proceedings are perceived by people?
Well, it creates a pretty challenging environment, right? On one hand, yeah, it can build public pressure for accountability, which some might see as good.
Sure.
But on the other hand, it can easily lead to assumptions, to biases, before the facts are even fully laid out in court. It really highlights how much these narratives get shaped by public interest and, pre-existing beliefs, almost as much as by the actual legal facts.
That's a really important point. Okay, let's pivot now. Let's get into the specific detailed allegations against Sean Diddy Combs himself. We're drawing here directly from the civil complaint filed by Cassandra Ventura, who most people know as Cassie, back in November 2023. And it's important we mention the source material itself includes a trigger warning for really graphic information, sexual in nature, including descriptions of sexual assault. So just a heads up for listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. And the core of Cassie Ventura's lawsuit, it paints a deeply, deeply troubling picture. She met Combs back in 2005. She was only 19. He was 37. She signed to his label, Bad Boy Records. Her accusations cover more than a decade, basically, from 2007 to 2018. And she alleges this long cycle of abuse, violence, and sex trafficking.
The specific acts laid out in that complaint are just, they're horrific. And they suggest this extreme level of alleged control. Cassie alleged Combs raped her in her own home in 2018, right after she tried to leave him.
Yeah.
There were allegations of frequent physical beatings, being punched, kicked, stomped on, leading to injuries like bruises, burst lips, black eyes, just awful stuff.
And beyond the physical violence, she alleged really extreme manipulation, things like blowing up another man's car, a Kid Cudie's car, specifically after he apparently showed romantic interest in Cassie, forcing her to carry his firearm, seemingly to show how dangerous he was, requiring her to get illicit prescriptions for drugs like opiates and ecstasy, apparently for his own use.
And then there's this whole section about the freak-offs, or FOs as they're called in the document.
Yeah, that's a significant and particularly disturbing part of the complaint. Combs allegedly forced Cassie to have sex acts with male sex workers while he watched, masturbated, and filmed it all.
Filmed it.
Yeah. He allegedly directed specific acts, used candles for lighting. The lawsuit says he treated it like a personal art project.
Unbelievable.
Cassie was reportedly required to find these sex workers herself, dress in lingerie, oil herself up. And these encounters, according to the suit, sometimes involved heavy drug use, ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, alcohol.
Like a cocktail of substances.
Right, leading to her apparently disassociating, needing 5E fluids afterwards to recover. Combs reportedly paid these male sex workers a few $1,000s each in cash.
It's hard to wrap your head around the level of control and manipulation being described there.
It really is.
And the lawsuit talks about her trying to escape multiple times, right? But his vast network of corporations and affiliated entities would somehow track her down.
Yeah, and implore her to come back, often threatening her career if she didn't. The consequences for resisting were allegedly violence, ultimatums, like being told she had a lot to lose if she ever went to the police.
You did.
The lawsuit even drew comparisons to those really unequal power dynamics in domestic violence situations we saw with, like, Bobby and Whitney or Ike and Tina.
Right, those historical parallels.
Exactly. And ultimately, Cassie suffered, according to the suit, immense emotional distress, addiction issues, nightmares, even thoughts of ending her life. It says she needed intensive medical and psychological care. She actually credits her children with saving her life.
Just devastating details. And then, what's maybe most striking, given how incredibly detailed and severe these allegations were, what happened right after the lawsuit was filed.
Yeah, this is pretty remarkable. This comprehensive lawsuit laying all this out was settled incredibly quickly. Like the very next day, November 17th, 2023, settled for an undisclosed amount.
The next day. Wow. So did that incredibly swift settlement kind of put a lid on things, or did it maybe have the opposite effect?
It seems to have had absolutely the opposite effect. That initial lawsuit, even though it settled fast, appeared to just open the floodgates.
Okay.
Because in the months that followed, we saw numerous lawsuits regarding sexual misconduct filed against Combs. These alleged incidents spanning from like 1991 all the way to 2009.
We're going back decades.
Decades. And then the Washington Post reported in October 2024 that a whole team of lawyers was planning to file as many as 120 more lawsuits.
120.
Yeah, including claims from 25 alleged minors, with some accusations involving drugging and hush money payments. So it suggests a potentially much, much broader pattern of alleged behavior being looked at, way beyond just Cassie's initial civil case.
That is a truly staggering number.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears now from those civil complaints to the actual criminal trial, which, as we speak, is well underway.
Right.
Sean Combs was arrested and indicted back on September 16th, 2024. The charges: racketeering, sex trafficking by force, and transportation for prostitution. He's been denied bail 3 times, currently detained in Brooklyn.
At the Metropolitan Detention Center, yeah.
And the trial itself kicked off May 5th, 2025 with jury selection. May 12th, we got opening statements, witness testimony started. That phase just wrapped up on June 24th.
Just recently.
And now we're in that final, really tense phase. Closing arguments began on June 26th.
It's moving fast now.
Yeah.
And the trial itself has definitely had some key moments and arguments we should probably touch on.
Please.
Cassie Ventura herself testified back in May. She described 11 years of alleged abuse. Now, the defense, led by Xavier Donaldson and Tenny Geragos, they tried to challenge her credibility, right? They highlighted some of her own text messages to Combs.
Okay, like what?
Things like, wish we could have FO'd before you left, and I love our FOs and we both want it.
How did she respond to that?
Well, Cassie explained on the stand that saying she was loving FOs were, quote, just words at that point. She suggested the defense was kind of skipping over the crucial context of control and coercion.
Got it.
She also testified about needing those IV fluids sometimes to recover from the encounters, and about developing an opioid addiction, she said, to feel numb.
And didn't the defense also try to frame these freak-offs as something consensual, like part of a certain lifestyle?
Yeah, they floated this idea of a swingers lifestyle, but Cassie pushed back hard on that. She said they were very different from times she might have occasionally watched Combs with other women.
How so?
She emphasized that Combs was, quote, controlling the whole situation during those private FOs, which often happened in dark hotel rooms. It really gets at that complex issue of consent when there's such a huge power imbalance.
Yeah, absolutely. And wasn't there a video? Some surveillance footage.
Oh, yeah. A really pivotal piece of evidence. Surveillance footage from March 5th, 2016. It reportedly shows Combs physically assaulting Cassie, kicking her, dragging her at an Intercontinental Hotel in L.A.
And that was shown in court.
It was.
Yeah.
And adding to that, a hotel worker testified that Combs allegedly paid $100,000 for that footage afterwards to keep it from getting out.
$100,000.
Wow. The testimony was that Combs feared it would ruin his career if it became public.
Wow. Okay. And what about other witnesses?
Prosecutors brought in 34 witnesses total. This included former girlfriends, former staffers, all describing what the prosecution argued was a consistent pattern of coercion, violence, and secrecy around Combs.
34 witnesses. And what was the defense strategy against all that?
Interestingly, Combs' defense team called no witnesses of their own.
None.
None. They relied entirely on cross-examinations to try and poke holes in the witnesses' credibility. They actually did manage to undermine one accuser's story by apparently proving Combs was out of state when an alleged event happened.
Okay, so trying to create reasonable doubt through cross-examination.
Exactly. And then in their closing arguments, the defense reportedly, quote, mocked the case, said the charges were badly exaggerated, and quite surprisingly, characterized the relationship between Combs and Cassie as a, quote, great modern love story.
A great modern love story. That's certainly a choice, given the testimony.
It is. Conversely, the prosecution painted Combs as a criminal leader, someone who ran a kingdom where, quote, everyone was there to serve. They asserted he wouldn't take no for an answer.
Okay.
They argued drugs were essential to making the FOs happen, and that Combs was 100% behind that attack on Kid Cudi's car we mentioned earlier. So really starkly different narratives presented to the jury.
Absolutely. Either a controlling abuser running an enterprise, or someone whose consensual lifestyle was just misinterpreted and exaggerated.
Pretty much.
And as we're talking right now, this is all incredibly immediate. Jury deliberations started on June 30th, just yesterday as we record this. But no verdict came back on that first day. What's the latest from the deliberation room?
Well, the jury did send out 2 notes to the judge, Judge Arun Subramanian. One note expressed some concern about juror number 3's ability to follow instructions.
Oh, what happened there?
It caused a temporary pause in the deliberations while the judge addressed it. The other note was simpler, just indicating they were done for the day and would resume the next morning.
So maybe a little bump in the road there during deliberations. Adds another layer of tension, I guess.
Definitely. It shows the process isn't always smooth sailing once the jury gets the case.
And just to make sure everyone understands the full scope of what Combs is actually facing here, legally speaking,
Mhm.
can you break down the specific charges the jury is deliberating on?
Sure. So Sean Combs faces 2 counts of sex trafficking. One relates specifically to Cassie Ventura, the other to an individual identified in court documents just as Jane.
Okay, so her identity is protected.
Exactly, which is common in these kinds of sensitive cases. He also faces 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution, again involving Cassie and this Jane.
Right.
But the really big one, arguably, is the charge of racketeering conspiracy under ICO. That's the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act.
ICO-K. You hear that term a lot with organized crime.
Exactly. It's a tool designed to prosecute criminal enterprises. And here, the prosecution is arguing that Combs ran this kingdom, as they called it, where all these alleged illegal acts, kidnapping, arson, bribery, witness tampering, forced labor, sex trafficking, transporting for prostitution, drug possession with intent to distribute.
That's a long list.
It is 8 alleged acts in total, spanning 2 decades, from 2004 to 2024. They argue this was all part of a sustained pattern of criminal activity and enterprise. And that charge, the RE2 conspiracy charge, carries a maximum sentence of life in prison.
Life in prison. So
Yeah.
the stakes could not be higher. This whole trial, especially when you think about that swift civil settlement, then the cascade of criminal charges, now this REPO indictment, it's such a stark look at how legal strategies and public perception collide, isn't it?
Really is.
It kind of demonstrates that even immense power and wealth aren't always enough to contain allegations once that dam breaks. It could potentially set a real precedent for accountability in an industry that, for a long time, maybe felt a bit untouchable.
I think that's right. When we look at these ongoing legal fights involving huge pop culture figures like Diddy and the talk around Jay-Z too, it feels like it reflects a broader societal moment, maybe a reckoning. The intense public scrutiny, how quickly the narratives can shift. It just shows the huge impact unresolved legal issues can have now on careers, on legacies, especially in the music industry. It kind of suggests that maybe the days of alleged bad behavior just getting swept under the rug, maybe those days are ending.
Really, it's changing.
Changing, yeah. And public opinion, especially fueled by social media, seems to be playing a much more powerful role in forcing these issues out into the open.
It's definitely a powerful reminder for all of us about the constant flow of information we're navigating and just how crucial it is to engage with it critically. Right?
Absolutely.
These cases, whether you're following every detail or just catching the headlines, they really force us to think about some big questions like, what responsibility do public figures, and maybe their inner circles too, what responsibility do they truly have when allegations of abuse surface? And maybe even more fundamentally, how does our justice system actually reckon with these massive power dynamics in high-stakes cases like these? It leaves you wondering, what stands out most to you about the public discussion and the legal process surrounding all these events?